Coming up today on the Locked On Hornets / Locked On Raptors crossover pod. We're going back to the crossovers, folks. We're going to discuss Scottie Barnes, LaMelo Ball. Who's the better player, and how much does their team's success hinge on the success of those individuals? And then we'll go with some roster rankings. Rank radio, baby. Gotta love it. That's all today on Locked On Hornets / Raptors.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's the Locked On Hornets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your pods, and that includes YouTube. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time? Sorry, Sean, I didn't fill you in. That's what we do after we say this episode's brought to you by Game Time.
I'm sorry I wasn't ready for it. I feel bad now.
It's not your fault. Now, when David hops on with us, it's David's fault. David, if you're watching, it's your fault. You know better. Sean doesn't know better. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Yes, this is not only Locked On Hornets. This is also Locked On Raptors. As you see, the host, Sean Woodley, joining me today. You can find his pod just like you can find ours anywhere you get your podcasts, all the digital platforms, Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff. Sean, we appreciate it, man. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good because the Toronto Raptors look like they're going to play at least some semblance of real basketball for, at least like 50 games or so. We'll see what happens once we get to the post-deadline era, which is, always a coin flip. But yeah, it's exciting. The Raptors have healthy players. They are not openly trying to trade their best player to start this season. It's a refreshing, beautiful, fresh start, clean slate here in Toronto.
We feel the same way, a beautiful, fresh, clean start here in Charlotte because of the new regime. You have Jeff Peterson, having his full offseason. He was actually named an interim GM, not so interim GM, as the guy last year after Mitch Kupchak stepped aside, and now he's the guy, and so is Charles Lee, and we have new owners, and so, there's so much new here in Charlotte. LaMelo Ball, not so new, but we're hoping for, I would say, a refresh with him. I'm hoping to refresh the page, especially with some of the injuries that he's suffered. And we know that this is someone that they gave a big contract to. We said it was cake. That was an easy decision. There was no waffling on whether they should give LaMelo a $200 million contract when you have that kind of talent. And the guy got to an all-star appearance his second year in the league, and then the last 2 years combined, he's played, barely half a season's worth in the last 2 seasons combined. So that's obviously not good. I know Scottie Barnes also, that's your guy that you're hoping to lead you to the promised land, whatever that may look like. And so I think the comparison here is interesting, Sean. How do you view these two guys via one, just pinned against one another, but also with how much their team's success relies on how good they are this year?
Yeah, I think the impetus for this conversation was we're looking at the Eastern Conference standings and thinking, I feel like one of these teams is going to be the 10th seed and one is going to be the 11th seed, and this is basically the range of outcomes for both teams. Some variance on either side.
Of little faith.
Look, man, it's nice to not be in the wizard zone of the Eastern Conference.
That's
you can
true.
strive for that. My whole thing this year is just be better than the Bulls, and I'm happy because boy, oh boy, the Bulls are depressing. But yeah, I think with Scottie and LaMelo, who has the sort of better season is probably going to determine who finishes higher among these two teams. And, I think the intentions of either team, we'll probably talk about later on, do they even want the 10 seed? But I think if both guys really pop, I don't think either team's going to be upset if they end up in the play-in conversation, if they end up even fighting for something higher than the 10th seed. And that is going to be totally incumbent upon them to have those kind of leap seasons. Or in the case of LaMelo, it's a different thing because LaMelo, I think, is more established as a guy who can drive winning basketball. We've seen it that second season where he was an all-star. When he's on the floor, the Hornets usually do pretty good things when he's engaged. He's playing kind of not a selfish brand of ball. Scottie Barnes, I think we're still a little bit unsure about just how high his ceiling can be. Can he be the engine of a functional offense? I think we have that answer with LaMelo. I feel maybe more certain that Scottie Barnes is going to be on the floor and stuff this year than LaMelo, considering recent history. And so I think the two of those guys pitted against one another. Very different players, obviously. Scottie
Right.
Barnes, I think, fancied himself a large point guard early in his career, but I think they've really kind of realized he's more of a sort of hybrid forward type, and he's not going to be someone who runs 100 pick and rolls a game. They got Emmanuel quickly for that now, because I think they realize the limitations of Scottie as a pure on-the-ball pick and roll creator. But I think both of these guys, with their passing vision, with their size for their positions, I think they're a fascinating duo to compare and contrast. I'm curious, Walker, like, how are Hornets fans feeling about the prospects of LaMelo kind of recapturing that early career magic that it seemed like he was going to just kind of build and build upon? The last couple of years have really felt like just kind of a letdown after how things began for him.
Yeah, a bit of a mixed bag. I would say LaMelo is pretty polarizing, because if you go back, this is what we've been talking about all offseason. If you go back to his Rookie of the Year performance and his All-Star appearance, national NBA media, local NBA media, we were all excited because this was a rookie that was affecting winning in a way that rookies usually don't do. And that's why he was able to win every Rookie of the Month award. And that's why he's able to, once he's healthy, his second year, that's how he's also able to get his first All-Star appearance. And now he's just not as healthy. And plus, LaMelo's personality, it's kind of hard to grasp. He's not very media savvy. He doesn't care to be media savvy. He's not one of many words. This is not somebody that wants to let you in on the personal life, what he's thinking out there on the court. And so I think the fact that we're denied access because of LaMelo just holding people a little bit at arm's length, I think it's hard for people to find this personal relationship with him, and then for maybe even galvanize around LaMelo. But that's not the case for everyone. Like, there are lots of people that do feel like LaMelo can be that guy. I'm one of them. So when I hopped on with Josh Lloyd on the Locked On Fantasy Basketball pod, we did the season preview stuff, and he asked for my bold prediction. And I said LaMelo is going to flirt for an All-NBA appearance this year. This all has to be, of course, contingent on whether he's healthy or not. And yeah, got a little safety word, flirt. I didn't say he's going to absolutely be All-NBA. But
you must caveat every bold prediction. That's
I need a way out. Where's the escape hatch? I got one. I built one in. Yeah. So like I feel like LaMelo can put up the numbers similar to what a Tyrese Halliburton might have, or a Trae Young, with these guys that sneak into the third-team All-NBA spot that have monster offensive numbers. Maybe they sneak into a play-in tournament, especially if everybody else on this roster is healthy. I think people can buy in as long as he's on the floor. He's wearing ankle braces this year. That's something he had not been doing the entire time. So there's something different now after having 5-6 ankle injuries. There's something you're doing different now to protect it. So I think for the most part, people are ready to see LaMelo in action, and as long as he can stay on the court, I think people will rally around him. What's the temperature on Scottie Barnes for Raptors fans?
I mean, it's like night and day from where it was a year ago at this time. He was coming off that second season where he sort of stagnated, was playing on a team where the fit was just really janky with him, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby. Him and Fred VanVleet didn't get along super well during that second season. And then last year he comes out and he basically gets better at every element of the game. He becomes a better scorer. He becomes a more efficient scorer. He ratchets up to 6 assists a game. He's grabbing boards. He becomes this defensive event creator with, I think nearly 3 stocks a game across the board. It was this like wonderful back line, help rim protector, safety, mess cleaner on defense. And he just kind of, it was remarkable considering how dire things seemed after his second season. I think this year there's a lot of optimism. We got it. Last season was cut short. He missed the last 21 games with a hand injury after, kind of it's like a freak play. I think he cut it on the net or something like that. Missed the last 20 games. And he has talked about how those last 20 games for him were really informative. He sat there, he was with the team, and he kind of learned from the sidelines. He talked a lot about sort of improving upon his communication skills. I think he's ready for the gig that is being the leader of the Toronto Raptors in a way he wasn't maybe, in the middle of last season when Pascal Siakam got traded and he was just kind of handed the keys in the middle of January and left to run with them. There were ups and downs. He had a really good month of February, but there were also some moments of kind of sulking and, sort of checking out when he wasn't getting the ball late in games. And I think it was a really informative time for him to kind of learn from the sidelines. He's talked a lot about Garrett Temple being a guy just like passing along wisdom on how to be a leader. And on top of that, I think there's just a lot more to tap into with his skill set, with how big he is, how strong he is, how he can get to his spots whenever he wants. and the passing vision he has. I think the big thing this year for him that's going to decide whether or not he becomes that sort of dude everyone looks at as a pillar of a franchise is the shot creation stuff. Can he be someone who runs some pick and roll? Can he find his own shot in the mid range? Can he use the leverage he has as a guy who draws a whole lot of double teams down low to create for others? I think that's going to be the sort of the tipping point for him this year. And I think there's a lot of optimism that in a team that actually makes sense around him now, with a little bit more shooting, with less of the overlap with Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, that he's going to actually have the canvas upon which to develop into that guy who you kind of look at as the guy you can build at least a pretty good playoff team around. And beyond that, we'll have to see beyond this year.
All right, you brought in the supporting cast. Let's dive into those details. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just
What do these
yet.
teams look like around the stars on each of these franchises? We'll get to that in just a moment here on Locked On Hornets, Locked On Raptors crossover. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time? Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks, it filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Plus, there's about a billion perks: seat views, lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit your 110% of the difference. They give you Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. And you know my favorite, they have all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. I absolutely hate that. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. Locked On NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time? More Locked
Game
On
time?
Hornets. Locked On Raptors. He's got it ahead.
I did it.
Let's get to the supporting cast, Sean. So, yeah, Raptors, a little busy last year at the trade deadline, or before, I forget when they made the trades, but either way, mid-season trades. RJ Barrett, you also brought in, who's the other Knicks player that I'm bringing up here? Emmanuel Quickley. Emmanuel Quickley was the guy. I know there was kind of a debate of who was the better player they were getting between RJ and Emmanuel. Let's start with you. Let's let the guest go first here. Raptors supporting cast, how do you feel about the team around Scottie Barnes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes more sense, like, geometrically around him. It's less talented, right? I was not someone who thought that they simply had to go trade Pascal Siakam just because, his contract was winding down. I thought because they got so little back for him, Bruce Brown and 3 kind of middling picks from the Pacers, I thought, why not keep him around, keep the talent in-house and see what works. I think there was like a 4-game beautiful fleeting stretch of Raptors basketball last year after the OG Anunoby trade where Quickley and Barrett came in, and Quickley, Barrett, Barnes, Siakam, and Jakob Poeltl absolutely torched teams for like a week. And then Poeltl got hurt and Siakam got traded like 2 weeks later. And so, the talent after the Siakam trade, certainly not what it used to be. I think Siakam kind of gets underrated as a very good player. And I think him and Scottie were actually figuring out how to play with one another. And so, while the fit wasn't ideal, I think the talent was worth keeping around. Bygones be bygones. Like, it's done now. We can't go back and relitigate. And so, yeah, the team is less talented, but I do think the fit is pretty clear. I think Quickley and Barnes in particular, they had trouble kind of massaging their chemistry last season, but I do think there is a lot there in terms of like how their skill sets complement one another. I think Quickley allows Scottie to not have to be that, guy who has to run a million pick and rolls like I talked about earlier, right? He allows him to kind of play in a few different spots, work from the elbows, which is a big part of the Raptors offense. And I think Quickley is someone who can run a lot of pick and rolls, can be your lead ball handler, but also is this really great frenetic off-ball mover who I think playing off of Scottie with his vision as a passer really works as well. Jakob Poeltl, I think, fits with those guys nicely too. He's one of the best screeners in the NBA, and this team really, really depends on good screening to kind of get their offense rolling. It's sort of like this machine of cuts and screens and movement. It's very European inspired, and I think Jakob Poeltl is a big part of that. The starting 5 should be very good. RJ Barrett was fantastic last year after coming over, and no one watched the Raptors down the stretch. If you did, you would have seen RJ Barrett score 22, 7, and 4 basically every single night on like 9 of 14 shooting. It's kind of ridiculous. He did the exact same thing for Canada in the Olympics in the summer too. And he did that in the first preseason game before he got hurt. Hopefully he's not out too long with an AC sprain, but the way quickly Barrett, Barnes, Pirtle, and I think Grady Dick is going to be the fifth starter in his second year, those guys should at the very least score a ton of points. Where the defense comes in, we'll see. They actually held up pretty well last year with that configuration with Gary Trent Jr. in place of Grady Dick. And so I feel all right considering how bad how bad Gary Trent Jr. was as a defender. All right about Grady Dick kind of filling in that place and not having too much defensive drop off. And I think the offensive uptick from Dick, who's just a way more dynamic 3-point shooter than Trent, should have some pretty good dividends for the team. It's in the bench where things get a little grim, and I'm sure you're going to say similar things about the Hornets as well. The starting five, if they're healthy, should be pretty solid, should win them some games and win a lot of minutes. After that, it's anybody's guess because it's Bruce Brown until he's traded. Kelly Olynyk, nice player, but has limitations now. Davion Mitchell, we'll see. Nice second draft swing, I guess, but never a guy who's really tickled my fancy. Chris Boucher, who's in year 14 as a Raptor, it seems, and always seems to be the ninth man no matter what he does. It's a bit of a grim scene in the bench rotation, but the starting five I'm pretty keen on, and I have a feeling you're pretty good with what the starters are going to be for the Hornets as well, providing health.
Yeah, I am. By the way, I don't want uptick for Dick to get lost in translation. I just wanted to point that out. That's something you said on the podcast. You're right.
It is a daily struggle, man, trying to navigate around that guy's name.
Well, you're just asking for it if you're gonna rhyme. Come on. If you're gonna bring uptick for Dick, then that's your fault. Come on. Starting five. Yes, I am a huge fan of the starting five because I feel you mentioned fit, right? Perhaps me and Doug haven't talked about this enough. I do feel like this is a perfect puzzle for LaMelo with everybody fitting so well together. And in large part, by the way, because I think one of the more underrated skill sets of LaMelo is how malleable he is. This is somebody that can fit in a lot of different offensive systems because of his ability to play off ball. They've never really experimented with it until now in preseason, where you see Brandon Miller bringing up the basketball. So now Brandon is allowing LaMelo to move with energy off of screens. Charles Lee was giving LaMelo credit with, having a lot of movement and finding a way to be a part of the offense without the basketball in his hand. So that Brandon Miller LaMelo backcourt can be absolutely lethal. I think there's absolutely all-star potential with Brandon Miller. So you might have one of these fun, Wizards types of star power backcourt back in the day with John Wall and Bradley Beal. They're not the same players, right? It's not the same duo, but it's young team. Can you build a foundation around them? Can they get to the playoffs and make a deeper run or be a tough out? That's what I envision, hopefully, with the star power they have. Miles Bridges on the floor, man. This is somebody that I was really interested to see if they were going to bring back or not. We obviously have the domestic felony violence charge, but that was 2 years ago. And as so many things happen around those types of situations, we see time allowing teams to decide to bring him back, or if they want to move on from him, fine. But I don't know even how much the narrative or the media was paying attention to the situation in a small market with Miles. And I guess they felt like they're going to bring Miles back and it's going to be on a declining deal. And there were some interested teams out there, but we don't know how interested. Clippers had some interest. They were rumored to be whatever, right? They bring Miles back.
Well, they have a type, you see.
They do. They do have a type, and Miles would have fit within that type. And Miles on the floor, I think, is embracing a third banana role. And he's talked about that at Media Day. He's talked about that with LaMelo and Brandon, and I think that's going to work well. I love Josh Green, bigger defensive body, team defender, just to help out LaMelo, not really worried about offense except for the shot making from beyond the arc. That's what I care about. Transition, some drives and cuts, of course, but more so, can you knock down open threes and can you defend? And I'm also a big fan of Mark Williams, the center down low. If he's healthy, I think Charles Lee is going to use him as a rover, like we've seen with, some of the other, and have him block a lot more shots, like we've seen with some of the other centers, while Charles Lee was on the Milwaukee Bucks staff and the Boston Celtics staff. So I like the starting five. I'm more hopeful about the bench now, Sean, than I have been before. Trey Mann looks absolutely awesome, and that was true even the second half last year. Trey Mann gets the opportunity. He's taking the right kind of shots. He's been gangbusters in preseason. And also Grant Williams, good shooter, really played a different role here in Charlotte and played it well. I like some of the depth that they have. So if we wanted to compare these rosters just real quickly before we move on to the third segment, Who you taking, Sean? Who is the roster you think maybe is even better now and set up better for the future?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think, look, I guess it all depends on how much I believe in LaMelo, right? Because if I don't buy into LaMelo actually sticking and being healthy, then it probably tilts Raptors. I think I'm probably more on the optimistic side of like eventually he's going to have a healthy season. Maybe the power of a new coach is kind of what this team needs to get moving and playing serious basketball. I'd say for now, I'd probably take the Hornets. I think LaMelo, again, he's proven as a guy who can be an offensive engine. Scottie, I think, can get there, but it's not yet proven and ironclad. I think I'm a big believer in Emmanuel Quickly. I think he's going to have a massive season for the Raptors. I think RJ Barrett's also awesome. I might take the starters over, like, of the Raptors over the Hornets just by a smidge, because I think Jakob Poeltl's just like a way more advanced and established version of what Mark Williams is or wants to be. I'm not a huge Miles Bridges guy. I think his defense is a real problem. Josh Green I think is pretty nice, but I would probably take Grady Dick like as an upside play over Josh Green. Grady Dick looks awesome in preseason. He's been flying around, throwing down dunks, throwing down acrobatic layups.
He's showing an uptick.
3-point shooter. Sure. 100%. That uptick from Dick, it's there. And so, yeah, I might lean sort of across the board, the Raptors starting five slightly ahead of the mix the Hornets have, but talent-wise, top end, LaMelo's the best player, I think, if everything breaks right. And I'd say the Hornets bench, as much as I'm not super keen on a lot of the dudes they have, I think Trey Mann, Vasilije Micic, I'm a pretty big fan of. I think Grant Williams is solid. The Raptors bench is just so grim and is really depending on a lot of young guys who they draft. They have 4 rookies coming in. Maybe in a couple of years' time, the bench looks better than it does right now. But I think because of that and because of LaMelo's high-end talent, I would take the Hornets just by a smidge. But I think it's a really close one, and I'd be curious to see, like, if you pulled 100 GMs, what they would say. I guess there's not 100 GMs, so 30 GMs and their accolades. I suppose
there are. If you go back in history, we can just find the retired ones. Hopefully there are enough still out there.
I'll give you Glenn Grunwald. Let's go.
Let's do it, baby. I'm ready to get all the GM surveys out there. All right, I'll tell you my answer, what I think, after the break. Coming up next on Locked On Hornets.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll talk more about what I feel between the Raptors and the Hornets, the better roster for the now, the better roster for the future, and finally, expectations. What are the goals for this season from each of the Locked On hosts? We'll get to that in just a moment here on the Locked On Hornets Raptors crossover. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season. You can even hop in the season if you want to. It's already started, but you can still get a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Again, FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. More Locked On Hornets, Locked On Raptors ahead. So I'm a big fan of the Hornets this year. I think that this regime has done an excellent job of building the pieces around LaMelo, going out and getting what was hilariously the first and second best player in the Gordon Hayward trade when OKC traded Trey Mann and Vasilije Micic to the Thunder along with picks in order to get Gordon Hayward, who's now out of the league. Sam Presti doesn't get fleeced too many times. I mean, that's a fleecing. So we'll take Trey Mann, who looks again. Hang
a banner for that.
We will.
That's impressive stuff.
It'll go right up there to the zero rest of our other banners. So I will say,
they don't do Southeast Division banners down there.
If they did, we wouldn't have one, Sean. It's like that down
God.
here. It's like that. Yeah, but we're moving. It's brighter days. No, I'm big on the future of this team. I would take the Hornets roster right now, and the reason being, if we wanted to keep it real simple, honestly, 2-star potential. LaMelo has an all-star appearance. Brandon Miller the guy was awesome last year, and Brandon Miller, I think, could make an all-star game this year. I don't think it will happen, but we see these big jumps from stars in the past. It's usually the second year that you see it from some of these guys. Perhaps it's in the third year, but if you have a 2-star backcourt, that's really hard to defend. Both of them can shoot. Both of them can pass. LaMelo is like a better guy with the ball in his hands to create for others, but Brandon has that. Like they complement each other, but can also take out the responsibilities if the other one was to go out and be injured. And so if we want to keep it real simple, I think just having two stars goes a long way in this league. Sure. And I think having two young stars goes an even longer way. And I think that's what the Hornets might be set up for now and towards the future. Now, what does that mean for a playoff spot this year? Yeah, I don't think that they're going to reach a top 6 spot. If they're going to make the playoffs, I think it's going to be via the play-in tournament, making some noise there, and then parlaying the play-in appearance into a playoff appearance where they'll probably lose in, maybe 5 games at the most. That's what I would expect. But I think there's real hope for that. Like, I think if everybody's healthy and the Hornets can get 60 plus games from Mark and LaMelo, which seems far-fetched, but like it shouldn't be. If they can be a healthy team, then this should be a play-in team, and then we can start to like cross our fingers and hope for a playoff spot. But that's what I'm hoping for, Sean. Like I think that's on the table for the Hornets this year. What say you about your Raptors?
Yeah, I mean, I think with full health, playing out the entire season, the Raptors can win somewhere close to 35 to 40 games. I think you bake in the growth of Scottie Barnes that we all expect. Like I said, I am a big believer that Emmanuel Quickley in a lead guard role is going to be pretty awesome. He was very good last year within a garbage team context, passing to like Jamias Ramsey and Jordan Nwora down the stretch, and looked really good doing it. And I think playing with, actual NBA players, lo and behold, is going to be good for Quickley's development there too. Again, I think the starting 5 is going to be a wagon when they're healthy and together. The problem is, I don't know how much the Raptors actually want to go and do it. I think if they're playing very well and you get to the deadline and they're, kind of surprisingly hanging around 500 or so, I don't think they're going to pull the shoot on the season. I think they're going to say, hey, like this is good for us. This is what we want to see. This is the foundation we're trying to lay, and playing meaningful games down the stretch is going to matter. They also have a very weird schedule this year that I think could play in a little bit into how things go. I think strength of schedule is a little bit overplayed because it's based on previous things that have happened and not so much what's in front of us. And it doesn't bake in injury or bad runs of form for teams or whatever. Whatever. They had the hardest strength of schedule through the first 25 games. I doubt they end up actually playing the hardest strength of schedule just because that's not how it all ends up working. But they have a really tough early, 25 games. Actually, their first 50 or 60 games are loaded with all of the good teams. And down the stretch, they play like the Wizards and the Nets and the Bulls and the Pistons and all of the really, really bad teams, like 15 of their last 20 games. I just think that by the time they get to that stretch where they could, in theory, pad their win total, they might have already said, all right, we took a real beating in the first part of this season. Let's just, let the season ride out, get a high lottery spot, and see what we can do to add to our team to maybe, compete with teams like the Hornets for that 2-star potential if they can get the right guy. Yeah. I am not a huge believer in tanking. I think it's bad. I think it often fails, and you're more often to be very disappointed by the lottery balls than not. But I think that's the kind of mindset they have going into this year. I think they're going to play competitive ball for the first three quarters of the year, 2/3, whatever, but it might not be enough just with the lack of talent they have. And if anyone gets hurt, if Jakob Poeltl missed time, if Scottie Barnes goes down, they're going to be dead in the water and they're going to be sliding down the standings. So while I think at full health, this team is very comparable to the Hornets, it might be better in terms of just like winning basketball games night to night. Because of that starting 5, I think they're probably going to end up behind the Hornets here, somewhere between 11th. I honestly, between 11th and 11th, I think they're going to be the 5th worst team in the Eastern Conference. I think the teams below them are so much worse.
No, you're right about that. There's a very distinct order. We feel very good about the teams that are going to finish at the bottom of the standings going into this year. All right, that'll do it for the Locked On Hornets, Locked On Raptors crossover. That's Sean Woodley. Make sure you check his podcast out for everything Raptors. Again, anywhere you get your pods. And I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3. And then you can catch our pods also anywhere you get your podcast. Sean, this was fun. I appreciate it. And good luck to you. And I guess good luck to the team, except in case it affects us in any way. And then I don't want them to do well. But other than that, good luck to the team.
Good luck to you in the thrilling battle for 10th in the Eastern Conference.
Yes.
The only race to watch in the NBA this year.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it, baby. I'm ready to battle it out. Thanks again to Sean, and thanks again to you. We'll be back with you tomorrow.